Hello everybody, welcome to Traveller's Guide to IELTS. I'm Andrew and these are English practice videos for people who are learning English as a second language, whether it's for IELTS, TOEFL, IGCSE, Pearson English or any other English language proficiency test. Press the thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the subtitles and leave a comment below. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the IELTS General Training module and looking specifically at writing task 1. IELTS writing is marked on 4 criteria. Task response, which means did you answer the question, and did you answer all of the question, and did you do it in the right way? Coherence and cohesion, does it flow? Does it make sense? Are your ideas presented in a logical order? Lexical resource or vocabulary, do you use a good range of words, high-level words, and use them correctly? Here, it's important to think about synonyms. And grammatical range and accuracy. So your grammar score is based on things like verb tenses, sentence structure, word order, and articles. Spelling and handwriting are also important. Bad spelling can affect your vocabulary score and it might also impede your coherence and cohesion. And handwriting is important unless you are doing the computer-based test. If the marker can't read what you have written, they're not going to give you a good score for your efforts. Task 1 should take about 20 minutes. But don't start writing straight away. You should spend the first 5 minutes planning your essay. Read the question carefully. Think about what you're going to write. Then 10 minutes should be enough for the actual writing part and save 5 minutes at the end for editing your work. Read it over, try to find any mistakes and correct them. You can also use the editing time to upscale your vocabulary, put in some better words, maybe change some of your sentences to make them a bit more complex, and read the question again to make sure you've answered it completely. Thinking about task response, the first task in the general training writing is always a letter. But does your writing look like a letter? It should start with Dear Someone, but if you're writing to the boss or the manager or the principal, don't assume that they are male. You'd be better off writing Dear Sir or Madam. Should it be formal or informal? Well, that depends on who you are writing to. Formal to a manager, principal or boss, informal to a friend, family or classmate. And here are some of the things that you should include in a formal letter as opposed to an informal letter. So don't use contractions such as can't in a formal letter. Use the full word cannot. And answer every part of the question. When you're writing your letter, think about who, where, when, why, what and how. Who are you writing to? Why you're writing the letter? And think of all the other details that you need to include. In this video, we're going to look at 2 example questions from real Cambridge IELTS books. I have prepared 2 example letters, one for each question, and we're going to go over them and explain what I have written. Here is the first one. This comes from Cambridge IELTS General Training Book 13. This is Test 1, Writing Task 1. And the question says, you work for an international company and would like to spend 6 months working in its head office in another country. Write a letter to your manager. In your letter, explain why you want to work in the company's head office for 6 months. Say how your work could be done while you're away. Ask for his or her help in arranging it. Write at least 150 words. You do not need to write any addresses, and begin your letter as follows. Dear someone. Okay, so looking at this, before we begin, we need to make sure we've read the question carefully. Try to understand it as much as we can. Look for the important points that we must include in our letter. The first line says you work for an international company and would like to spend 6 months working in its head office in another country. Make sure that we don't get any of those details wrong. 6 months is important, we need to mention that. The office must be in another country, not just another city. So when we're writing, make sure we don't get any of these details wrong. Next, it says write a letter to your manager. Now this is important. We are writing to our manager. And it also later said begin your letter as follows: Dear someone. Your manager, you probably know their first name, but if you're writing a letter to a manager, it should be formal. So instead of writing their first name, write Dear Mr. someone or Dear Ms. someone. But as your manager, you would know their name. So don't write Dear Sir or Madam in this case. Then it gives us some ideas of what we need to include in our letter. We're going to say why you want to work in the head office, how your work could be done, and ask for their help. It says here write at least 150 words. This means that there is no upper word limit. So as long as you don't spend too much time on it, as long as you have enough time to complete writing task 2 as well, you can write as many words as you like. You will not be penalised for writing 300 words or more, although there's really no need to do so. But if you write less than 150 words, that could affect your score. So write at least 150 words means 150 or more. Okay, let's look at what we're going to do. So first of all, we need to write the name of the person. And I've chosen the name Dear Mr. Black. It's just a fairly common name in Western countries. Very simple name, but really any name would do. Now in my first paragraph, I'm going to give a bit of background and explain why I am writing this letter. I don't need to introduce myself because he's my manager, so he knows me already, and it will have my name at the end of the letter. So I'm not going to write that on this occasion. Instead, I said, I recently read an article on the company website about an employee who had completed a 6-month placement at our head office in Canada and was thinking that it could be a great opportunity for me to further my career. Okay, there are some details that I've added in here that are not in the question, but it does give you freedom to make up some things and make up some details to make it more realistic. So I've invented an article on a company website about someone who had done this before, and that's where I got the inspiration for this idea. I've used the word placements there, so a 6-month placement. This means I'm working somewhere for 6 months. Notice I'm not saying a 6 months placement because I'm using 6 month hyphenated as an adjective here. Next, I've said that the head office is in Canada. Now, I've chosen to put a country name there rather than a city name because that implies we're an international company and that the head office is in a different country. If I was already in Canada and I said our head office is in Canada, that would be a bit strange. So putting the country name here implies that I'm wanting to go to a different country. And that would give me good points for task response because I've taken into account what it said in the question. And then at the end I'm saying this is an opportunity, so this is part of why I want to go. And to further my career is a nice phrase to use. It sounds quite professional and it's more evidence as to why I want to do it. Next paragraph. As you know, I have been working here for just over 5 years now and have introduced a number of policies which have streamlined the manufacturing process significantly. However, I believe that there is still room for improvement. Spending time at the head office would allow me to observe how things are done in a much larger setup and give me new ideas to bring back. Okay, so this paragraph is dealing with the why. I've started with as you know to introduce a bit of familiarity between me and the boss. So as he is my boss, I don't really need to explain my job. He would already know this. Really I'm explaining it to the marker or to the person who's reading it. but making it look like I'm just recapping something that the boss already knows. Then I'm using some industry-specific vocabulary such as policies, streamlined, and manufacturing process. These are examples of business speak vocabulary that you might use in business, which makes the letter seem more professional and more realistic. I've used this phrase, room for improvement, which means things can get better. In the next paragraph, I deal with the questions who will deal with my work and how can the manager help. I wrote, if I were to go in the summer months, we would be less busy here. My team would be able to cope with the workload in my absence, and I would be available periodically to assist them remotely. However, I would need your help in arranging the placement. If you think this could be a useful endeavour, perhaps you could speak to someone at head office on my behalf and set the ball rolling. So again, I'm thinking of some work-based vocabulary such as workload, available periodically, and remotely. And right at the end, I've used an idiom, set the ball rolling, which means to get something started. Then I say, thank you for considering my request. I look forward to your reply. This is a pretty standard thing to say at the end of a letter. It's quite polite, it's quite formal, makes it look more like a letter, makes it seem more realistic again. And finishing off with, yours sincerely, Robin Smith. Now we use yours sincerely when we know the person's name. And you should sign it off with your full name, although this is not my real name. I have just used a pseudonym as an example. So altogether this is 198 words. So it meets the minimum word requirement. I had originally written a bit more, but I have removed some things that I felt were not necessary. I do find it quite hard to stop myself from writing way too much. But remember, you only have 20 minutes for this essay, and it needs to be planned, written and checked in that time. So if we look back at the question, let's just check and see if we've answered everything. You work for an international company and would like to spend 6 months working in its head office in another country. Okay, so I said I wanted to work in Canada. I said our head office is in Canada. That implies it's another country and that we're an international company. And I did mention 6 months in my letter. I have written it to my manager, Mr. Black. And as it's to a manager, the letter is formal. In the letter, I have explained why I want to work at the head office. I think it would be good for my career, but also beneficial for the company as a whole because I can bring back new ideas. I didn't talk about the social side, so like I might like to experience that, to go to another country for travel, to meet new people, but I've tried to keep it more professional. Say how your work could be done while you're away. Well, I've said that my team could cope with the work and that if I went during our quieter time, there wouldn't be as much work to do anyway. And finally, I asked for his help in arranging it. I asked him to speak to someone on my behalf. I have met the minimum word requirement, so I'm very happy with this essay. As we can see, it looks like a letter. The ideas are arranged in a logical order. I've used a range of vocabulary and a range of sentence structures, and my grammar is good. So overall, I'm happy with this letter. Let's look at another example. Here we have Cambridge IELTS General Training, Book 13, Test 2, Writing Task 1. You recently organised an all-day meeting for your company, which took place in a local hotel. In their feedback, participants at the meeting said that they liked the hotel, but they were unhappy about the food that was served for lunch. Write a letter to the manager of the hotel. In your letter, say what the participants liked about the hotel, explain why they were unhappy about the food, and suggest what the manager should do to improve the food in future. Again, write at least 150 words. This is always the same for task 1. And you do not need to write any addresses. So letters usually have addresses on them, but for this writing task we don't need to do that. But this time we should begin our letter with Dear Sir or Madam. And the question is telling us this, so we don't even need to think about that. In this case we are also writing to a manager, but this time it is not our manager, so we don't know the name of the person. That's why we're writing Dear Sir or Madam. We don't know if it's a man or a woman, so Dear Sir or Madam covers both of those. As it's to a manager, it has to be formal, and this time we are complaining about something. So task 1 letters are often complaint letters. Something has gone wrong and we need to complain. So we need to be formal, but we also need to be quite strict and quite severe with our language. Make sure that it comes across that we are not happy about something. We're not going to be rude, but at the same time we don't want to be overly friendly. Let's break down the question. You recently organised. Okay, so that means that I, writing the letter, am the person who organised the event, and recently is also important. So don't make this something that happened last year. Let's put a date on it and make it something recent. Now, we organised an all-day meeting for your company. Right, so this is a business meeting and one that's lasted all day. It took place in a local hotel. Local is also important, so the hotel is close to where you work, close to your office or your factory or your premises. In their feedback, participants at the meeting said that they liked the hotel. Okay, so we're not complaining about everything. There are some positives. And when it says in their feedback, maybe this is just word of mouth that you have heard, or maybe you printed off a survey for them to fill in and asked for them to give some formal feedback. It doesn't say here, so we can choose that. So they liked the hotel, but they were unhappy about the food that was served for lunch. Lunch is also important. Make sure we're not talking about dinner or breakfast. These are all details in the question that we have to get right in the essay. That shows that we're paying attention to the question, that we're reading it carefully, and that we're understanding what we're being asked to do. Now, in these letters, it often makes sense to just write about the suggestions in the order they're given. You don't have to. You could mix it up a little bit if you wanted, but they're often in a fairly logical order anyway, and I'm going to deal with them in that order. Now, I've actually written a lot more for this answer. So here is the first half. I've started Dear Sir or Madam as it suggests. Be very careful with your spelling here. Don't spell these words wrongly. We're copying it exactly from the question, so there's no excuse for getting those wrong. I'm going to start by introducing myself and giving a bit of a background as to why I'm writing. So I started by saying, I am the events coordinator at Avatar Solutions Limited, and I am writing to you regarding a conference that was held at your hotel on Friday the 7th of August 2020. Okay, now it said I organised the event, so I'm calling myself the events coordinator. That is my position. And the company name, Avatar Solutions Limited, this is just one I've made up. You can call the company anything. Again, writing an actual company name gives your letter a sense of realism, and it also lets the person you're writing to know the details about which event you're complaining about. And I've also been more specific using Friday the 7th of August 2020. So I've used the exact date so they can look on their records and they can see what happened and who was working. So if this was a real letter that you're writing, we need to be specific about the details. I've chosen a recent date because it said recently in the question. And here I've used the word conference instead of all-day meeting. This was the first time we had chosen to use your hotel as our meeting venue, and unfortunately we received several complaints from our delegates about the food that was provided. Okay, a bit more background as to why I'm writing. So I'm introducing the idea that the food was not up to standard and we received several complaints. This received several complaints was in the feedback, I haven't gone into too much detail about how they fed that back, but that doesn't matter. We received the complaints, that's all that's important. And here I've used the word delegates to refer to the people who are at the meeting. The word venue here means location for holding the meeting. But I'm going to start off by saying a bit about what the people liked. Not everything about the event was bad, however. I had chosen your hotel partly based on the location, and our staff said that was ideal. The hotel is less than 1 kilometre from our office, has ample parking, and the picturesque outdoor space was an unexpected bonus. So here we're dealing with the positives, first of all, such as the location, which is a better word than saying the place or the area. We're saying it has ample parking, which means it has enough space for people to park. And I've described the outdoor area as picturesque, meaning it's beautiful to look at. Now on to the second half. When the lunch arrived, however, it was extremely underwhelming. The items which were supposed to be hot were lukewarm at best. There were no vegan options, even though we had specifically asked for those to be provided, and the total amount of food was not enough for the number of guests, despite the fact that we were 3 members of staff down on our predicted numbers. Right, so I'm using the word however here to introduce that we're now talking about something different. We're now focusing on the disadvantages. Underwhelming means it's not up to people's expectations. It's not what they wanted. Lukewarm means not hot but not cold. Somewhere in the middle. Not hot enough for hot food anyway. I've introduced the idea of vegan options. This is quite a popular topic at the moment. So vegan options contain no animal products. So this is providing another level of realism. Many companies have vegan employees who have specific dietary requirements, and I'm saying here that those were not met. And I've also said that there wasn't enough food, even though we were 3 members of staff down. That means that there were 3 people fewer than we had expected. So I'm not just saying they didn't like the food, I'm saying that I'm giving 3 examples of possible problems with the food. If it was just one small thing, perhaps that wouldn't be worth writing a letter of complaint about, but because there's 3 things, they all add up to make it quite a serious situation. Next I wrote, we had already booked a further date for our September meeting and had hoped to make this a regularly occurring fixture. However, we will have to see a vast improvement on the standard of catering, or we will be forced to switch to another venue. I would suggest that you consult with your head chef to make sure these concerns are addressed. Now I'm using some past perfect tense here. So we had already booked a further date. So I'm introducing the idea that we will be going back to the hotel in September, but that was not booked after the first meeting. This was already booked in the past. So we'd probably book 2 at the same time. And we had hoped to make this a regularly occurring fixture. So in the past, this was something we had thought about doing. And this all suggests that things could change now following our first meeting. I've said we want to see a vast improvement. So we want to see a large improvement. We want to see things getting much better. Catering here, another word for providing food. And at the end, I'm telling the manager what I expect him to do based on this letter. I want him to consult with his head chef to make sure these concerns are addressed. So the manager himself probably doesn't have much input into the food. The hotel will have a team of chefs there, and it's really their responsibility to get the food right. So the manager needs to speak to the head chef and try and improve things for next time. So all of this is designed to make the letter seem realistic and with quite a serious tone. And I finished it with yours faithfully. We use yours faithfully with dear sir or madam. And again put a full name, Robin Smith, not my real name. With a formal letter, a full name is better. But you don't need to use your real name in IELTS writing. Okay, so there we've seen 2 examples of real general IELTS Task 1 writing questions, and my example answers. And the whole time I'm writing it, I'm thinking about task response, coherence and cohesion, the vocabulary I'm using, and my grammar. I hope you found that interesting, and if you want to have a go at those writing tasks yourself, you can compare your answers to mine. Thanks for watching, and we will be back again with more ESL English practice videos with Traveller's Guide. Goodbye for now.